All right, summertime's starting up. Kids are starting to get let out of school. Local pools are starting to open. Families are taking vacations to the beach. Everybody's excited to swim and relax. And I thought this was the perfect time to review Jaws. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm probably gonna get banned from every body of water after this episode. Because let's be honest, after reading the book and watching the movie for the umpteenth time, I don't trust any body of water. And I mean any body of water. Pools, suspicious. Lakes, absolutely not. Ocean, dude, that's where the sharks live. I am not going there. And I know what's probably going to happen after this episode. Oh, Will, sharks don't live in chlorinated waters. Yeah, that's exactly what a shark wants me to think. Okay, I think I've given you a little bit too much of my shark and ocean theory, so I think it's time to dive into the review. Roll the intro. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Big Screen Leap, the show where we take stories from words, pixels, and scripts and see how they land as Hollywood hits. I'm your host, William Redman. You know, when I started working on this episode, I thought it was going to be pretty simple. You got water, teeth, screaming tourists, boom, the perfect mashup for a summer cinematic blockbuster. But then, I started reading the book. Oh boy, I learned a lot about politics, affairs, mob ties, and enough marital tension to qualify for a soap opera television show. Today, we're diving into a legendary adaptation, Peter Benchley's 1974 novel Jaws, and the 1975 blockbuster film directed by Steven Spielberg. And trust me, one of these stories is actually about a shark. Now, I'll be completely honest, for the longest time, I didn't know that one of the most iconic cinematic movies ever made was a book before it was a movie. But honestly, it kind of makes sense, because Jaws has literally been everything. From merchandise to theme park inspiration, Jaws is not just an American summer blockbuster, it's a worldwide phenomenon. Everyone knows who Jaws is. So not only are we going to dive into the first iconic movie, we're also going to dive into the novel. Was it worth it for the book to make the leap from page to screen? I think we already know the answer to that. I guess really the question we should be asking, was it worth it for Steven Spielberg to make the changes to Peter Benchley's book, or should he kept it closer to the book? Well, let's dive in. We're going to need a bigger boat, because we have a lot to uncover today, starting with the plot. So let's talk about the 1974 book written by Peter Benchley. Now, if you're only familiar with the movie, buckle up, because there's a lot to uncover here. The book is pretty different from the movie. Where the movie is a thrilling adventure ride, the book is what would happen if a shark attack was going on during an episode of Days of Our Lives. The story opens with a young woman named Chrissy Watkins, who goes for a swim in the ocean late at night near Amity Island, and then she becomes seafood. A shark attacks her in horrifying detail, and right away, Benchley makes it clear this isn't going to be some fun adventure story. This shark is brutal, relentless, almost unstoppable, and it terrifies the town. We then meet Police Chief Martin Brody. Book Brody and movie Brody are very different from each other. In the book, he's stressed, bitter, insecure, financially struggling, and constantly worried about fitting into the wealthy beach community. He moved to Amity from New York hoping for a better life, but he feels like an outsider among the rich summer residents. Brody worries just as much about social status as he does the shark. Then you have Mayor Vaughn. Vaughn decides to keep the beaches open despite the attack because he's worried about repercussions from the mob. That's right, in this version, it's not about being greedy. Well, it is, but for different reasons. The mob help finance local businesses and developments in Amity, and Vaughn fears that if he closes the beaches down, the tourists will stop coming, and the mob will come for him. We then meet Matt Hopper, the oceanographer. Hopper in the book is a bit of a snob. He comes from wealth, looks down on the townspeople, and acts like the smartest guy in the room. He's basically Squidward from SpongeBob, but in human form, and actually has success. Now, here's where the book takes a big turn. Ellen Brody, the wife of the chief, starts having an affair with Hopper. Yeah, that actually happens. In fact, huge portions of the book focus on Ellen feeling dissatisfied with her marriage and reconnecting with her attraction to wealthy upper-class men. So not only are we dealing with shark attacks, we're also dealing with marital drama. Speaking of shark attacks, they continue to happen to both swimmers and boaters alike. One of the most memorable victims is young Alex Kittner. In the book, after Alex is attacked, the town reacts politically and emotionally. People panic, businesses suffer, the town becomes divided, everybody's angry at everybody, and Brody feels increasingly powerless. Eventually, members of the town catch a tiger shark, and the town thinks the nightmare is over. Hopper tries to suggest to everyone that they got the wrong shark, but nobody listens to him. Which ends up being a recurring theme in the book. An expert says something, and everybody else says, well, that doesn't line up with what I want. Eerily familiar to what we deal with in today's society. Brody and Hopper decide to go hunt the shark. This is where we meet Quint. He's a tough-as-nails sailor that is both obsessive and unpredictable. He's basically what happens if you leave Captain Ahab alone with fishing equipment and zero therapy. He agrees to hunt the shark for a huge fee, and Brody and Hopper join him on this ship, the Orca. The final act becomes much more survival-focused. The shark relentlessly stalks the Orca. Quint becomes increasingly unstable. Hopper decides to go underwater in a shark cage, which doesn't work. The shark destroys the cage and kills him, so now Brody is trapped with both a deranged Quint and a killer shark. Then, Quint eventually dies. After the shark attacks, Quint shoots it with a harpoon, but the rope gets wrapped around his ankle, and the shark eventually drags him under the water. Finally, the shark just dies. From way too many injuries. That's it. Brody survives by swimming back to shore alone, and the book ends on a surprisingly bleak note. No huge triumph, no celebration, just exhaustion. Honestly though, the darker ending fits the tone of the novel perfectly. Now let's talk about the 1975 movie, and this is where things get legendary, because Steven Spielberg took the bare bones of the movie, cut out the soap opera, and somehow accidentally invented the Summer Blockbuster. The movie pretty much opens identical to the book. Chrissy goes swimming at night, then John Williams introduces two of the most famous notes in movie history. You know which notes I'm talking about. Even if you hadn't seen the movie, everybody knows which notes I'm talking about. Dunna. Suddenly, nobody wanted to go near the water. We then meet Chief Martin Brody, played by Roy Scheider, who is completely different from the book. He's relatable, he's trying to protect his family, he genuinely cares about the town, and he's very uncomfortable with the ocean. Which is odd. Why would you want to take a job in a town surrounded by water? Anyway, we meet Mayor Vaughn after the attack, and unlike the book, this has no mob ties. Vaughn is just greedy because he doesn't want to miss out on the money the tourism Amity brings, so that's why he refuses to close the beach. Honestly, this works way better than what they did in the book. It simplifies the conflict. No mob ties, no political affairs, just greed and denial. We still get multiple shark attacks throughout the movie, including the Alex Kittner attack, which is one of the most iconic sequences in film history. The beach is crowded, everybody's nervous, Brody is watching the water intensely, and Spielberg builds tension masterfully. You're scanning every swimmer, every splash, every scream, and then chaos. The shark attacks, people panic, and Brody realizes the nightmare is only getting worse. We're then introduced to Matt Hopper, played by Richard Dreyfuss, and rather than being a snob, he's likable, energetic, funny, and nerdy. Smartly, Spielberg removed the affair with Brody's wife and makes him and Martin have good chemistry together on screen. Because let's be honest, nobody sitting there watching a shark movie was thinking, you know what this movie needs? More relationship drama. The movie for the most part plays beat for beat the same as the book. Sailors capture a different shark, Brody and Hopper try to convince him it's the wrong one, and the townspeople refuse to listen. They then decide to team up with Quint to pursue the shark. Quint in the movie is played by Robert Shaw, and he truly brings the chaos to this role. Everything about Quint in this movie is iconic. The voice, the attitude, the Indianapolis speech. Good grief. That speech changed the tone of the movie. What was originally a suspense thriller, after Quint gives that speech, suddenly it feels haunted. The third act is basically cinematic perfection. 3 men, 1 boat, 1 shark, and escalating disaster. The orca slowly falls apart, Quint becomes obsessed, Hopper tries to use science, and Brody is stuck in the middle trying not to die. Then comes the most iconic ending ever filmed. Hopper goes down in the cage, but the cage is broken. However, Hopper is able to escape and hide on the seafloor from the shark. Quint dies, but instead of being dragged under the water by the shark, he is eaten whole in an absolutely terrifying scene. Brody, while hanging on to the last remains of the orca, is able to shoot an oxygen tank near the shark, blowing it up. It's absolutely ridiculous, but totally awesome. Hopper surfaces, and he and Brody make their trek back to the island, where they and their family will never be bothered by a shark again. So let's be honest, there isn't a ton of realism in this movie. But if I'm being honest, in a movie like this, realism is overrated. If a movie gives me an exploding shark, I'm happy. Now, let's talk about how the novel came to be. Peter Benchley came from a writing family and worked as a journalist and speechwriter before writing Jaws. He became fascinated with shark attacks after hearing stories about massive sharks caught by fishermen, and he wondered, what if a shark deliberately targeted a beach town? That idea eventually became Jaws. Benchley spent months researching sharks and marine behavior, and while modern marine biologists would later criticize parts of the book for demonizing sharks, at the time, it felt terrifyingly believable. The novel released in 1974 and became an enormous bestseller. People couldn't put it down. It tapped directly into primal fear, because deep down, humans hate not knowing what's under the water. I mean, seriously, the ocean is terrifying. We look at a giant unexplored abyss and said, yeah, let's vacation there. Universal saw how popular the book was, so they bought the rights to the story, and here is where things get absolutely insane. They gave the directing job to Spielberg when he was only 27 years old. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Everything could go wrong. And it did. They used multiple mechanical sharks to portray Jaws, and they constantly had issues with them. They would malfunction, they barely worked in salt water, they sank, they broke, they stopped moving. At one point, Spielberg reportedly joked the movie should be called Flaws. But surprisingly, this flaw actually saved Jaws, because Spielberg had to hide the shark for much of the film, which ended up making the suspense way more effective. The less you see the shark, the scarier it becomes. Now, most movies at the time filmed water scenes in controlled tanks. Spielberg, however, filmed on the actual ocean, which ended up being very difficult. Boats drifted, the lighting changed constantly, actors got seasick, equipment malfunctioned, and the schedule exploded. The movie went massively over budget and over schedule. Studios genuinely thought it might fail. Finally, we can't talk about the production without talking about John Williams' score. What was crazy though? People initially laughed when Williams introduced the score to Spielberg, but over time, it became permanently burned into human civilization. You hear those notes and immediately think, something with teeth is approaching. The film released in 1975, and it became a cultural phenomenon. Lines wrapped around the theaters, it terrified audiences, and like I said, it invented the summer blockbuster. And to be honest, without Jaws, you probably don't get modern movie events the way we do now, which means no Star Wars the way we know it, no big-time blockbuster summer movies. Jaws completely changed Hollywood. Now let's compare the two. First off, the core premise remains intact. Both versions focus on a shark terrorizing Amity Island. Both center around Brody, Hopper, and Quint. Both feature the town refusing to deal with the problem quickly. And both build towards the final shark hunt. Next are the themes. Both explore fear. Fear of nature, fear of losing control, fear of greed overriding safety. Both versions show how communities sometimes ignore danger when money is involved. Finally, the tension is both similar. Both the book and the movie excel at suspense. You constantly feel dread building, and even when you know what's coming, it still works. Now what about those differences? Oh boy, do we need to talk about those. The biggest change right off the bat between book and movie is the relationships. The movie completely removes the Ellen Hopper affair. Again, this was such a great decision because every time the book cut away from the shark horror to relationship drama, I just wanted the shark to come back. Next, Mayor Vaughn's motivation. The movie removes the mob subplot entirely, which was absolutely the right call in my opinion. It streamlines the story and makes the conflict easier to understand. Next, the tone is different between book and movie. The book is much darker, meaner, and more cynical. The movie is adventurous and thrilling. It still has horror elements, but it's far more crowd-pleasing. The ending is another difference, and mostly because of our survivors. In the book, Brody is the only one to survive the attack, and the shark just dies from too many injuries. In the movie, we get a cool one-liner, one shot, and then the shark blows up. Oh, and Hopper survives as well. Also, Quint dies differently in both. In the book, he's dragged under the water by the shark. In the movie, the shark eats him. Finally, the characteristics between our main book and movie characters are totally different. Brody is a lot more disgruntled in the book. In the movie, he's an everyman trying to protect his family and the townspeople. Hopper in the book is a home-wrecking snob. In the movie, he's a lot nicer and someone that we can relate to. A lot of changes were made from the book to the movie, but did that make it successful? Well, let's get to the final verdict and find out. So was the leap from page to screen for Jaws worth it, or was it a sinking ship? This adaptation absolutely works, and if I'm being honest, this might be one of the most entertaining adaptations of all time. The book is surprisingly good. Like I said, it was a long time before I knew that this was a book before it was a movie, and it was a fun read. It's tense, thoughtful, dark. However, the movie takes that core idea and perfects it for cinema. It trims out the soap opera parts, it sharpens the pacing, it gives us unforgettable performances, it creates legendary suspense, and it transformed a solid thriller novel into one of the greatest movies ever made. That doesn't happen often. Usually when adaptations trim segments from books, it's to the detriment of the movie. But that doesn't happen here. Jaws actually gains something. It becomes bigger, more iconic, more emotional, and more fun. And honestly, this is again one of those rare cases where I'd say the movie is better than the book. Not because the book was a failure, but because Spielberg understood exactly what needed to change. Not only did Jaws become a giant cinema icon, it became a cultural monster. Jaws became one of the first movies to fully embrace blockbuster merchandise. Somehow, a movie about a giant murderfish became marketable family entertainment. You had t-shirts, posters, toys, board games, novel reprints, lunchboxes, shark models, towels, beach gear, which is honestly kind of bold if you lay that out on the beach. Then, things got even crazier because Jaws eventually became part of theme park history. At Universal Studios California, the Jaws ride became one of the most beloved rides in theme parks. And honestly, it was perfect for a theme park. You boarded a tour boat around Amity Island, and on the tour, of course, everything goes horribly wrong. You see explosions, fire effects, the shark attacking the boat, skippers yelling dramatically while everybody screamed. People loved it. It became one of these signature attractions at the park for decades. So yeah, when people talk about Jaws, they're not just talking about a shark movie. They're talking about a story that changed Hollywood marketing, summer movies, merchandising, theme parks, suspense filmmaking, and pop culture itself. The movie took a soap opera about a shark, remodeled it, and gave us one of the most iconic movies of all time. If you've ever been afraid of getting in open water, it's probably because of this movie. But that's all the time that we have for today. Did you enjoy Jaws, either the book or the movie? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video you saw today, consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and ringing that notification bell so you're notified next time we post a video. Until next time, from page to screen and everything in between, this has been The Big Screen Leap. And remember, if the ocean starts playing music at you, get out of the water! Bye, everyone.